have you felt stuck lately? Felt like no matter what you do, you just make no progress on your project, on your goals? I've been feeling that a lot lately. Spent this whole entire past week just searching on how to make the perfect YouTube title, how to make the perfect thumbnail, how to make a devlog seem really appealing. Right now, after spending hours of writing up a script that I thought would be perfect for this video, I just ended up tossing it to the side and just keeping the highlight points, talking about what comes to my mind because that's what I feel is most important. So this week, I want to talk about game mechanics that I've been working on for Annie's Cross. And for those of you who don't know what Annie's Cross is, it's a 2D puzzle game where you have to help Annie upload her first video. And of course, it's not going to be easy. As Annie, you'll have to overcome obstacles, avoid herself before you can even begin to record that first video. So with that out of the way, here are the 4 main mechanics that I either started working on this week or updated or made tweaks to so I can get across the feelings that we all face as independent creators. So the first thing that I wanted to discuss was the enemy design for this game. They say that we are our own worst enemy, and I've definitely spent a large amount of my life putting myself down. So I know what that feels like. That feeling is the main inspiration for the enemy of this game, as the main enemy is Annie herself. An evil version of Annie that wanders the house and will basically chase the player if the player gets too close. Of course, some of the problems I had with the enemy is that it'd be impossible to get it to go through doors, so I decided that it should teleport instead. Problem there being, the player would have no idea where this enemy is, and I fixed that by just simply adding an audio cue, letting the player know ahead of time if they heard that cue, that the enemy was there, and that they should be careful. This, of course, still left one other problem, which I honestly don't know how to solve. Problem being the enemy could honestly just teleport right on top of the player, and since the enemy moves faster, well, the player might not have any choice but to get caught, and that could lead to some unfair gameplay. So I'm going to have to give that a little bit more thought and update you all on a later devlog. Another point that I wanted to discuss is the idea of the house looping. So what I mean by that is if Annie tries to leave the house without uploading that video, or if the enemy manages to get Annie's fear all the way up to 100%, the game will loop and the player will spawn back where they first started when they clicked new game. Of course, there'll be some changes to the house, these changes being more horror and negative in nature, so the house and the stuff that's in it, and the beginning being more positive, uplifting, kind of like cheering Annie on, and then the further it getting, the more it becomes negative, it puts Annie down, which is basically the idea of, first of all, change, and how we often seek to try to avoid change, even though we say we want to change. But the other idea also just kind of going back to, we tend to put ourselves down, and it's easier to convince ourselves that it can wait, or that it's better this way rather than the way we want. Of course, the problem here, finding, is that means I have to create a lot of assets for one area, and that's also a lot of text considering the fact that Annie can just walk up to these, press the interact key, and basically get a little bit of a snippet or a bit of dialogue about the thing. That has ended up being a lot more work than I kind of bargained for, and I'm nowhere near to the point where I would say that I'm even close to finishing. And the other main thing that I worked on this week was fixing up the clock UI and getting things to be a little bit more friendly with how the player interacts with it and how it works. Originally, I had thought about setting the puzzle time, so the time that the player would need to set the clock to in order to complete it, to the time of when the player actually clicks new game. Problem with that was I had no idea how to even begin trying to figure out how that time could translate into the rotation coordinates for the minute or hour hand. And so eventually I just ended up dropping it because, well, I'm not smart enough to figure it out. And I really didn't want to spend a whole lot of time trying to figure it out. Instead, I decided that I would just go ahead and put a clock in the game world and then just have the player interact with that clock, which will tell them the current time that Annie seems to be stuck in, and then Annie can set the time from that clock. The main idea behind the clock being that the best time to start toward your dreams and your goals is now, and to not waste what little time we have. And then finally, the last thing that I worked on this week was trying to get these mannequins set up with a 2D light that would be where the player could rotate the mannequin to change which way the light was facing. The player would then need to shoot the light from one mannequin to the next, and by doing so would be able to listen to each of the mannequin's stories. So I thought this would be really cool if these stories could be based on real life creator stories. It seems like it would be worth the effort to do. That way it would make them a lot more relatable rather than just me kind of discussing stuff that I've gone through and I've talked about, which I still think is helpful, just not as broad as getting a lot more people's experience. So to conclude, you can see how I basically got stuck a lot this week, and while there is a lot more that I could talk about, like for instance why I decided to make the game in pure black and white, these were just kind of the main things that I ended up either touching on in the past few weeks or just really wanted to discuss in this video as it relates to feeling kind of stuck. Anyway, like I mentioned earlier, I would love to hear more people's stories on how they have been stuck in their own journey and how they overcame it. If I think they're appropriate, I'd love to be able to put these in this mannequin puzzle. So if you have a story that you think would be interesting to share, please feel free to leave a comment below or join the Discord server and let us know. Finally, with all that being said, I'm still kind of trying to figure out what works best with this channel and my own game development journey. And I know in the last video I said that I would try to do a video every week. That honestly just doesn't seem possible, as I could spend an entire week just thinking about the idea and the script, let alone recording the audio and messing and editing the video. Thus, like I mentioned in a poll that I put out, I think trying for a 2-week format for long-form videos would be best. I'll still try to post shorts after I post each long-form video, but I don't want to commit to that either, as short-form content seems to be a big weakness of mine. So with all that being said, and until next time, stay awesome, keep creating, and remember to spark the imagination. If you feel stuck, like I mentioned how I did quite a lot in this video, you might find this video helpful, as I go a lot more in depth to the challenges that I've faced in the past and how I'm trying to come over them.